Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Chris Borg. I'm a policy manager at NELC. It's my pleasure to be today chairing our online event, our latest online event on how local councils can benefit from the Levelling Up agenda. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Firstly, I'd like to quickly run through a few housekeeping announcements, some of which are on the slide on the screen in front of you. Do use the Q&A function throughout the event to put questions to our speakers, please. And also use the chat function to interact with your fellow delegates and to share any information or links if you could, please. In addition, if you do require any technical support at all, please do post that into the chat and my NELC colleague will do her best to help. The closed caption feature, subtitles can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. And for desktop, laptop users, to turn on closed captions, please select Show Captions, and the button will be labeled CC. If the button isn't visible, please select the three dots on the bottom right corner of the screen, and then select Captions. After that, you'll be prompted to click Show Captions, so please select this option. If you're using a mobile device or tablet, please scroll across the menu on the bottom of your screen and select Captions, and you'll then need to click Show Captions. We're covering this off just to make sure that everyone, perhaps who has non-visible disabilities, is able to properly and completely access the event, as we've had some previous delegates who've been in that position. So just bear with me if you could, please. Once these captions are on, you can then access a live transcription of the event. And if you selected the closed caption feature, please use the reactions feature, the next button on the right hand side of the screen, by ticking the yes button, the green emoji with a tick, to show us that the closed captions are working at your end. Again, if you're experiencing any technical difficulty at all, please contact NELC support via chat, and we'll endeavour at any point during the 75 minutes to rectify the issue. And after the event, we'll send you any presentation slides today. I don't think that any of the speakers actually have got slides that they are intending to speak to, but in case it's the odd one, we will send you those by the end of the week in a post-event mailing, and any other useful information or links. And we'll also be inviting your feedback on today's event, so please do look out for the event feedback form, which should pop up on your screen following the end of the event, basically, within Zoom. So, just moving on to the next slide, please, Liv, if you could. Just remains for us to, on this slide, thank our corporate sponsors, Clear, CCLA and Glacier Eliminations, for their extensive support for today's NELC online event and those taking place for the rest of this financial year. Thanks, Liv. Next speakers. Thank you. Without their support, of course, we would not be able to hold events like today's or any of our suite of online events to March. So thanks hugely to them. Okay, moving on to the event itself. Enough of me going on. The Levelling Up agenda has been a hot topic recently, as we know, and has been since the original Levelling Up white paper came out in February 2022. With many questions about what it means, which areas of the country it applies to, and which sectors will benefit. Local parish and town councils are uniquely positioned, in our view, to take advantage of the Levelling Up agenda. Just a reminder, Liv, you need to make Adam, please, a panelist again. He's currently in as an attendee. He had to drop off, okay? And I believe Sophie may have to rejoin as well. So could you please let them both in and make them panelists once they're attendees again? If that's okay, please, Liv. Thanks. So as we mentioned, local councils are uniquely positioned to take advantage of the Levelling Up agenda, but they need to be prepared for the challenges that come with devolution. This event today will explain how local councils can survive and thrive in a devolved environment by taking on assets, liabilities, and services from their principal authority, something that we're seeing happen, as in the case of Somerset and other areas, all too often. You'll learn about the benefits and challenges of devolution and hear from experts today on how to make the most of the opportunities presented by the Levelling Up agenda. So, Again, by joining us today, you're basically going to be understanding better how local councils can benefit from this whole levelling up agenda, what steps you need to take to prepare for devolution. And you'll hear from speakers, some brilliant speakers with experience in local government and councils at principal authority level navigating the devolution process. They'll share their understanding, best practice and lessons learned, giving a helpful perspective on succeeding in a devolved environment, whatever that means, either side of a general election. Today's event will be of interest to any of you who are councillors, clerks and community leaders who want to understand the opportunities and challenges of the Living Up agenda and how to prepare for devolution. And finally, you'll understand how to survive and thrive in this devolved environment and make the most of the opportunities provided by devolution and levelling up, in brackets, as the latest label for it. So today I'm thrilled to be joined by a brilliant panel of speakers. Adam Hawksby, new Town Czar and Deputy Director at Onward, Councillor Carl Les, Leader of North Yorkshire Council, and Sophie Hosking, Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods at Cornwall Council. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Adam. Over to you, Adam. Welcome and look forward to hearing you speak.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for having me, and always pleased to chat to Alc and kind of work with you guys. We've advocated at Onward for a long time about the role that town and parish councils can play in levelling up and regeneration. So pleased to do our bit and share some of our research. As you said, so my day job is as Deputy Director of Onward, where I've been for a couple of years. I was previously Head of Policy to Andy Street up in the West Midlands, so I was delivering some of this in local and regional government, but have also started a role recently as the chair of the government's towns unit, so helping them to deliver their long-term plan for towns. That's a £1.1 billion programme taking place in 55 towns across the UK, who are receiving a 20 million endowment style fund to do kind of long-term bottom-up community-focused regeneration. So I'll talk today mainly with my Onward hat on, but as we go through the discussion, happy to pick anything up on that long-term plan for towns. And it might be that people here today are running town or parish councils in the areas where those 55 towns are focused. So what I'll give you a preview of in my opening remarks is a piece of work that we did that came out at the start of last year now, called Levelling Up Locally. We wanted to understand what levelling up looked like from a bottom-up perspective, from neighbourhoods, towns, parishes, as well as kind of local authorities, as opposed to from Whitehall down. We were worried that the agenda had been too focused on large-scale capital projects, on kind of big economic development. Of course, that stuff is really important if you want to close regional gaps and regional divides, but it needs to be met with a kind of bottom-up focus on pride in place, on quality of life, and on the things which actually are the foundations of economic development in the long term. So for that work, we spent time in towns across the country: Barry in South Wales, Oldham, Walsall, Clacton, South Shields. And in all of those places, ran focus groups, chatted to councillors, to members of the public, to businesses, to police forces, to others. And we came away with the view that there are really 5 areas of focus for levelling up locally, 5 things that we heard consistently from the public and from local leaders that were priorities. And as I run through each of those 5, I'll give a sense of the role I think local parish town councils can play, and the opportunities within the agenda for you guys to play a really important role. So the first of those 5 areas was tackling antisocial behaviour and preventing it in the long term. This was, to be honest, a surprise to some national policymakers that we gave antisocial behaviour such prominence in our work. But the conversations that we have with members of the public, when we said, what are the things that are barrier to you feeling proud about your patch, or is your area going in the right or the wrong direction, they would often say, I am worried when I walk around the town centre at the moment, because there are a small number of individuals that themselves might be suffering from addiction or are homeless, that are intimidating and make me feel unsafe walking around. There are groups of kids that hang around the fountain or the waterfront, particularly after school, and congregate there, that mean that I'm worried about going there to do my shop and I'd rather order it in. These sorts of things we heard really consistently, and we felt that it was under-emphasised in the national policy discussion about levelling up. Now, the government did released an antisocial behaviour action plan, and some of you may be in areas where pilots are happening around hotspots policing, basically using information about where some of these hotspots are. We know that about 50% of crime occurs in 5% of postcodes in the UK. So making sure there are regular visible patrols in some of these areas. But actually, as well as some of that quite police-focused activity, there's a huge amount that local and town councils can do. Let me give you two examples. One is there's lots of really good evidence that the state of the public realm affects how much antisocial behaviour might happen. Where there is an area with a significant amount of graffiti, broken street lighting, a smashed up bus stop, park benches that are in states of disarray, it's more likely that those become areas where people who are loitering or engaging in low-level crime will congregate and spend time. When those places are repaired, that the lighting, the state of the public realm, it makes it more likely that people will, walk around in those areas. It's common sense. Jane Jacobs in the 60s talked about the eyes of strangers being the key thing that makes public areas safe. So that sort of thing makes regular people going about their business more likely to spend their time there, and that decreases the likelihood they become a hotspot for loitering. So public realm is something that can absolutely be done to tackle these sorts of things. The other is the use of wardens and neighbourhood wardens. So more and more local and parish and town councils, sometimes in partnership with other districts or other local authorities, are thinking about using wardens that might serve a couple of roles. They might be environmental, might be kind of addressing litter or the state of the public realm as they're walking around, but also just a visible presence, right? A person in a high vis, whether they're in a business improvement district on a high street or walking around a green space, can make people feel more safe because they know there's someone who's taking that stewardship role in the public realm. So first thing we talked about, making areas safe and secure. It's also been a big focus of the long-term plan for towns. Second area, high street and town centre regeneration. It'll be very unsurprising to lots of you on this call that high streets and town centres have a really symbolic and emotional importance for people when it comes to pride in their place. When a high street is boarded up or run down, it makes people feel like their area is forgotten about. When more independents start opening up and footfall increases, people feel like there's a bit of a buzz to an area. Now, we're not going to be able to go back to an era of retail-driven high streets and town centres. We're going to have a transition towards more people living in town centres and converting some of those properties into residential, and also more events, more of an experience of going into a town centre. In some places, that might be leaning into heritage assets that people have or green spaces. In others, it might be hosting regular cultural events or festivals or fetes or town markets. There's a lot of evidence behind town markets where their work being a fantastic draw for footfall. And within the things I've said there, clearly a big role for town and parish councils to play in running those events, maintaining that public realm. There also might be areas where you can nudge on larger local authorities to better use some of the powers that they have. So we talked about Section 215 notices. Hastings cleared up masses of properties on their waterfront by issuing Section 215 notices requiring property owners to address a state of disrepair in their properties, boarded up windows, drains hanging off the sides, etc. A legal power there that is relatively easy to use and pretty effective at improving the state of a high street. The other one we talked about is high street rental auctions, a new power that's been introduced in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, in which a council can require a landlord of a property that's been vacant for 12 months or more to hold an auction and accept a bid, doesn't have to be the highest bid, but a bid in order to bring that property back into use. So second bucket, high streets and town centres. The third, I got asked actually earlier this week about kind of pride in place, about how you should think about increasing it or protecting it or revitalising it. And all our evidence seems to indicate that when you say to someone, what makes you proud of your area, there is often either a cultural asset, a public building, a piece of history, or a sports club, which everyone speaks to, right? Whether that's the cabbie, the shop owner, if you do a focus group, you will essentially hear it from a few people and all of you will know what that is in your place. In Oldham, it was the Fate of Oldham Athletic Football Club. In Clacton, it was the Pier. In Walsall, it was the Arboretum. Not every single person, but you start hearing this more and more regularly. Now, if those assets fall into a state of disrepair, the pier burns down, the park is not safe to go into at night, the football club goes into foreign ownership and starts going down the league tables, as happened with Oldham Athletic, then what you end up with is that pride massively diminishing. So within a third bucket, we talk about protecting and supporting those cultural assets, heritage assets, sports clubs, the thing in your community that gives people a sense of local identity. And again, a huge amount that can be done there by parish and town councils, because they're often the stewards of some of these assets, or the people that might, via a community ownership process, take them on or run the activities that animate them or maintain them so that they can be held in public use. Those things actually, far more than often some big flashy council initiative, look at what already exists, what people have memories of from them growing up, their parents taking them to them. That's the thing that gives people a sense of rootedness in a place. That third bucket is around culture, heritage, sporting assets. The fourth bucket is around growth in the local economy. So that's probably not bringing in a brand new Sports Direct, Amazon warehouse, or whatever else, but helping local businesses to grow and to expand. In our report, Levelling Up Locally, we have a range of levers that could be used here. Some of these might not be right for parish and town councils. We know that economic development role probably rightly often sits at kind of higher economic geography. But it is worth thinking about business improvement districts that can help local shops to recover, business support that's targeted at at what they call the non-tradable economy, at your hairdressers, cafes, pubs, bars that aren't looking to export to another area, but just looking to provide a good service to people locally. There's great examples of business support programs that, again, aren't about adopting 5G, but about having a good business plan or what good management practices look like. So it might be worth thinking about how can we help our 20 high street businesses to just become that little bit more productive, so they might be able to pay an increased energy bill or take on a new person. And the fifth area we talk about in support, and I'll finish here, is on providing community-based support to the most disadvantaged. We know that there are pockets of real poverty in a lot of communities across the country, and it's often statutory services, whether national or at the council level, struggle to support those groups. So loads of really good evidence that local community groups, there might be 2 or 3 people that run a service, are most able to provide long-term support to those vulnerable communities, and particularly where they might have developed a chronic health condition or be struggling with debt or transitioning from different types of benefits. So again, it may be that it's not right for parish and town councils to launch those sorts of services, although I know some of you do have service delivery responsibilities, but that support for those that are struggling with poverty is an enormous part of the Levelling Up agenda, and it's somewhere where the bottom-up approach really works. So I will pause there, but just those 5 things we found are really important. There are definitely opportunities for parish and town councils to deliver against some of those priorities, and I know from judging your awards recently that many of you already are. So thanks, Chris. I'll pause there.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Adam. And yeah, we know you're a staunch supporter of parishes and of NALC, and you do a fantastic job supporting us. Thank you so much for that and being a brilliant judge of the Star Council Awards last year. It's all, as you say, actually bleeding across a topic like today, levelling up, and also the Star Council Awards, which are our kind of sector hallmark awards. There is an overlap, and that is that levelling up and devolution are also a chance for parish councils of all size to step up to the plate and to shine, as with the Star Council Awards. So we would encourage councils to carpe diem and all that, and sort of try to make a difference in that space. Thanks again, Adam. We'll hear more from you, I'm sure, later when the Q&A come up on the Q&A section. But thanks for that. So moving on to the next speaker. I don't know if you'd like to show your camera there, Carl, but it is Councillor Carl Les, who's leader of North Yorkshire Council, and clearly a sort of force up there. And as we were discussing last week, Carl, wanting to allude to this, but North Yorkshire again went through the whole local government reorganisation process recently, and is currently or beginning to embark on the devolution deal process as well. So constant state of flux, and exciting times up in North Yorkshire. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Chris. And as you say, I'm Carl Les, I'm leader of the new North Yorkshire Council. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've been a district councillor for about 30 years, and I was a county councillor for 2 years, less than that, 30 years. I was the last leader of North Yorkshire County Council, and I'm now the first leader of the new North Yorkshire Council. North Yorkshire Council's faced 2 major initiatives post-COVID, both challenging. Perhaps the biggest challenge we had, though, was actually surviving COVID in the first place, with a tremendous spirit of cooperation that we had amongst all the services and all the people of North Yorkshire. We managed to come out with a very low number of fatalities, although every single fatality is a tragedy, of course. We had a high vaccination rate, and we managed to keep on delivering our services. So perhaps that was our biggest challenge recently, but now we have these other two challenges, which were separate, but were actually interlinked. The first was devolution, the holy grail of local government. For as long as I have been a councillor, I've never met anybody yet who hasn't said, we can make local decisions better than people who are 250 miles away in Whitehall. So that's what we've pursued, that local decision making, getting decisions made in County Hall rather than in Whitehall. And I think we've landed a good deal on that. The second was local government reorganisation in North Yorkshire, removing one tier of local government. When we started out on the devolution trail, there was a request to consider it, and then a minister then changed that from a request to a requirement. So the previous way of working, the two-tier way, although you could say it's three tiers if you count in parish councils as well, but we tend to think of it only as two tiers for counties and districts. The previous regime had lasted for 50 years, since 1974. It did work, but it was inefficient, and it was more costly because of that inefficiency. And so we moved to unitary, which actually is not unusual. The majority of the country actually has unitary government rather than two tiers. So we started on this huge merger of 8 councils into one. We've created the third largest unitary council in the country after Birmingham, over 1 million population, Leeds 800,000, and now North Yorkshire at 620,000. And of course, we are the largest by geography. We're now 9 months old. I think it's been a successful launch. Some people might differ in that opinion, but we think it's been successful. We've established our management tiers. We've got most of our major policies in place now, or they're in development, and we have delivered stable services since day one. And I'm so pleased that we actually did do local government reorganisation, because we're actually starting to reap the LGR dividend. When we put our bid to government, we said that we felt that we could deliver between 50 and 70 million pounds worth of savings every year. It's been a steady start because COVID and the war in Ukraine and inflation have had an impact on it, but we have made a start. We've reduced the number of councillors and saved £700,000 a year there, and we've saved £5 million in senior management. And there's more to come through restructures. And I think that we're in quite an enviable position. I was in a meeting recently with 17 leaders of upper tier authorities, and I was the only one who wasn't struggling to set a balanced budget with limited impact on services. I'll freely admit we are making mistakes because we employ people, not robots. But the test for me is how quickly we correct those mistakes. And looking at the mistakes, by and large, they're the ones that would have been made under the old system anyway. Very few are systemic to the new ways of working. Thinking back to our Devo bid that we put to government, we accepted that size is a factor, but size is manageable. If it wasn't, then Jack Cohen would have opened his first Tesco shop and stopped at 1, and Conrad Hilton would only have built 1 hotel. We have to remember that since 1974, we've been delivering 80% of local government services. The county council was delivering 80% of local government services by value to those 3,000 square miles, which is the old county council footprint. That's the same footprint for the new unitary council. Officers and frontline staff have always delivered services locally. Managers were making local decisions about those services in local offices, but we wanted to go further. And in our bid, we actually said that we wanted to be the most local large council in the country. And we have this concept which we call double Devo, and that's moving decision-making partly from County Hall to our area committees where our councillors work, but also, especially in the context of today, from County Hall to the village hall to the parish hall. I'm a fan of parish councils. I was one myself for about 15 years. I attend all the parish councils in my own division on a very regular basis, but the only reason I came off parish council is we moved house, and I've now moved to a village where there's a parish council and there's no vacancies. at the moment. So as a fan of parish councils, I wanted to involve them more in any case. And of course, as we know, and you'll know very well, Chris, and people on the call will know, some are excellent, some are good, some are not so good, and some actually need some assistance. So there's a range there, and we have to admit that there is a range. So we set out a parish charter, which is a way of working between the new council and the parishes, so that we can actually have an understanding of how we're going to work together. We took some advice and guidance from other newly created unitaries, Buckinghamshire, Durham, and Cornwall, who we're going to hear from in a little while. And to my mind, every day is a school day. You know, we learnt from those other councils. And we set out some principles about double devo. The first is that nothing will be dumped on parish councils. They have to want to take it on before we consider what it is that we're going to do with them. And we started with some pilots. I mean, the previous 2 tiers lasted 50 years. I think unitary government will last longer than that. So we need to take some time to get it right. And that's why we started with 6 pilots. We established another 2 principles with regard to the pilots. There should be no detriment to the council's finances. In other words, it shouldn't cost us any more. And we have to be sure that whoever it is that we're engaging with is competent to handle the transfer. Put it another way, we will delegate our responsibilities. We won't abdicate them. And if it doesn't work, we will retrieve the service. We have a range of bids, the 6, as I say, some very, very small, up to one very large, ambitious one. They're in rural areas, they're in urban areas. They're being evaluated, but our commitment to the 2 biggest bids is that we've put together a team of officers from all disciplines in the council to help get that bid over the line, to identify where any weaknesses might be and actually correct them. And finally, I'll just mention that we also administer the Shared Prosperity Fund. We work with the voluntary sector in particular, but also with some parish councils on some of the key themes: town centre capital schemes, town centre revenue schemes, and community decarbonisation schemes. So I hope I've given you a flavour of our commitment to levelling up. We want to be levelled up ourselves with government, but we also want to level up internally. And I have to say, I'm grateful for the support that I've had from our 6 North Yorkshire MPs, from ministers who I've come to know very well in conversation about levelling up, the civil servants who have actually worked very well with us, and our own team of expert officers, and of course, our communities, including parish councils. So I hope that's given you a flavour. I'm happy to answer questions later.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Carl. Didn't know you'd been a previous parish councillor. That's entirely unsurprising. In any case, knowing you're a huge advocate, as are we, for double devolution in parish councils, and huge thanks for that. It's refreshing to hear that, given some of the travails of other newly reorganised principal authorities, to hear that North Yorkshire is doing so well. And what with something over 700 parishes in your patch, that's critical. As you said, and long may that kind of commitment continue. So huge thanks, Carl, and again, we'll hear from you no doubt in a bit with answering some of those questions. So I think just about 5 or 6 minutes ahead of time, would like to introduce Sophie. Sophie, sort of introduced earlier on as the Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods at Cornwall Council. Carl mentioned you earlier on, and as a fully parished area of, I think, one of the 4 in England, we really look forward to hearing how your council is engaging on the devolutionary front with parishes. Several, certainly a few hundred of them aren't there in Cornwall, and how that's progressing and next steps. Over to you, Sophie. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. It's very nice to be here. As Chris said, I'm the Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods at Cornwall Council. I've had most of my local government career in Cornwall, though I did nip over the border into Devon for a few years. But Cornwall, many of you will know, is a unitary council, so similar to Carl in that respect. We're just about to reach our 15-year anniversary as a unitary. So we went to a unitary status in 2009. So from 1 county and 6 districts to 1 Cornwall unitary council. At that point, we took a firm commitment to keep our local connections with our town and parish councils, because effectively they became our second tier of government, of local government in Cornwall. So this has been at the heart of our localism strategies throughout our entire existence. As you said, Chris, we're fully parished. We have 212 parish and town councils. We've actually got a city council, a community council, various parish meetings, but we refer to them generally all as local councils. We've also got a very strong local association here in CALC, the Cornwall Association of Local Councils, and we have a brilliant relationship with them. Well over 80% of our local councils are members, which is really helpful as that kind of focal point of contact. So we also have a very strong voluntary sector forum in Cornwall, which is the other side of the coin for us as well. We're trying to take a non-patriarchal approach. Cornwall Council can't do everything anymore. We have to move into that space much more of being enablers, facilitators. So we've got a localism strategy, which the latest iteration of which was published in 2021. That was developed with our town and parish councils and also the voluntary sector, and signed up to by all parties. And at the centre of that is that strategy around community assets and services, around decision making in our communities, around action and functions, and the support mechanisms around it. And the principle behind it is to really keep everything at the appropriate level of government in Cornwall. So whether that's national government input, Cornwall Council governance, or local town and parish and councils. So there are a number of different mechanisms for this. There's the devolution of further devolution of assets, but also devolution of services, devolution of powers, of decision making, and of budgets. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of those. In terms of devolution of assets, we've actually devolved, since becoming unitary, well over 500 assets to our local town and parish councils through a number of projects. Some of them, there have been multiple assets in a project. We've had over 350 projects with 500 assets. It's been an interesting journey. I think in the early days, it was very much about saying, take it or we'll close it, particularly in relation to some public toilets and things. That wasn't a great start to our devolution journey. I think we lost a lot of trust from town and parish councils in that respect, and people felt like liabilities were being foisted on them without any kind of recognition of the costs, and that this was basically a cost shunting exercise. We have recovered from that over the years, and we then moved to a more well, come to us and tell us what you want, and we'll try and facilitate it. And that was good to a certain extent, but it wasn't a very structured approach, and there were some drawbacks. We've now reached a much more middle ground where we are asking local community area partnerships to put forward strategic plans, and I'll come back to them in a minute actually. But we're also identifying as a council our buckets of assets. So there's no point going and raising expectation about a piece of land that we would not devolve, because it would be too high value in terms of its return for us if we were to sell it, or because it might be part of our net biodiversity plans, or there might be other reasons, like a strategic asset holding. Having said that, we've got well over 6,000 assets that we would like to talk about that don't necessarily fall into those buckets. We've got some principles around this, because our preferred position, and we've got a policy around this, is in terms of actually passing freeholds over as opposed to leaseholds. And we like to not, as far as possible, put any overage or conditions on those. Occasionally, we do need to put some conditions around something, but generally, we don't want to hand anything over in a way that it's fettered. one of the reasons behind that is because we are actually handing our assets over to democratic institutions who are accountable to local people in the same way that we are. So why would we need to apply any further restrictions on that? And so that's quite a key part. We also hand over, like those packages, to be sustainable and cost neutral to everybody as far as possible. So we will hand over income generating assets as well, such as car parks or spaces where people could have concession arrangements, and that's fine. So that helps to provide a sustainable platform to do it. Thinking about devolving services, we have had a really amazingly successful approach with our library facilities. We've got 28 libraries in Cornwall. We were faced with closing many of them through our budgetary position. And we launched in, I think it's 2017, 2018, we started a programme with our town and parish councils for our town and parish councils to operate them. 24 of our community libraries are now operated and managed by our town and parish councils. Actually, one of those is actually through a community interest company. But so our whole library service in Cornwall, it's supported. We provide the IT, the management support and the infrastructure, but it's all run through our town and parish councils. And it means that we have 28 in our thriving libraries. What's really interesting is footfall has grown, the opening hours have been extended, the local events are better, the libraries are honestly better run through our town councils than we ever achieved through running them ourselves. The other, just going back to Adam's point actually about antisocial behaviour, we've got some arrangements with some of our towns where the town and parish councils part fund some antisocial behaviour officers to support all of those things that Adam was talking about. That's been a really good scheme, and we also devolve various services in terms of some of our environmental services, and there's financial arrangements with the town and parishes to do that. We recognise that quite often services and functions are far better, more efficiently and better quality carried out at a local level. Another area is in terms of powers, so whilst the upper tier authority has to apply for them, we work with town and parish councils over PSPOs, so the public space protection orders, and we've had some really successful examples of addressing very particular problems, because every town and parish is different, and but some need a little bit more support and help than others. Our SPF programme, talking about levelling up, has been extremely successful. We put a capacity building fund in place as part of the SPF programme of £1.2 million, and that's been we've already over 900,000 has already gone out the door. The full 1.2 is committed. We're just processing the final applications, and that's really to support any local parish and town councils or local community company in building capacity. So it might be for some architect's fees, or it might be to develop a project or do a feasibility study. And then that feeds into a much wider community fund, which is a 12 million fund, SPF fund, that town and parishes can apply for. Part of the review process for the SPF is through our community area panels, which all town and parish councils have a seat on, and they help review those applications that come forward. So it's not just about giving the grants out, it's about the local town and parish councils and being involved in reviewing and signing off those grants. So that's really key to us in terms of our approach, because it's a two-way relationship. It's got to be based on trust and mutual respect and understanding what people are best at, and the local councils are much better at understanding the very local issues. So I think I just also wanted to refer to the kind of the support that we kind of wrap around that, and that's through. Have I still got a couple of minutes? Okay. So in terms of, we have regular newsletters, we provide training on anything from safeguarding through to all sorts of different financial support or financial training. We help with bids and funds to funding applications. We also So there are issues and downsides to this. So one of those is capacity. So for example, with the devolution program, the actual capacity that we have in the council to move assets over, it's, you know, there's a lot of legal work, there's a lot of property input, there's surveys, all sorts that need to be done. If we have that issue, think of the receiving end of that, the town and the parish councils. The capacity within them is limited. So we do try and support that as much as possible. And quite often, as part of a devolution deal, we will provide finance for the town and parish council to get professional support to help it over the line. So that could be part of the deal. We might also provide dowries to make sure that an asset is in good condition when it's handed over, or for the local council to do that work. I did want to mention, though, that it comes at a cost. So Cornwall has 13 out of the top 50 top pre-accepting local councils in the country. Falmouth Town Council, who recently received or are in the process of receiving about 99 local assets, have got a precept of about £423 at a Band D property. So I think that's the most expensive in the country. So there is a cost to it. Having said that, I think the local residents in Falmouth are very proud of how active their community is. I'm going to stop now because I realise I have run out of time, but I'm very happy to take questions as part of the panel. Thank you.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sophie. That's really, really great nuts and bolts summary of what's going on in Cornwall, and a model, I'm sure, for other unitary councils across England to follow, to engage in, with their parish councils on this agenda. I've just actually been reading a headline sent to me by a colleague that Hyndburn Council have apparently rejected a devolution deal for Lancashire that would have seen the creation of a new combined authority, but not the creation of a directly elected mayor. So there is something we can include, I think, in the post-event mailing. There's like a Lancashire Telegraph link that I've just read there, which does demonstrate that I think it's a mixed bag, isn't it? Where devolution deals are being considered, that actually, as with LGR, as Carl mentioned, they're not necessarily minefields, but actually there are some brilliant, outcomes and some brilliant efficiencies that Sophie mentioned that can be gained for communities. But actually, in terms of a specific model, there are challenges and barriers to overcome. So that's a headline we'll just for the complete spectrum we'll include in the post-event mailing later this week. But yeah, thankfully today we're hearing some brilliant sort of headlines about good case study news stories, and from Adam those 5 brilliant buckets about about levelling up and how they can best be achieved. So thanks to all 3 brilliant speakers. Moving on next, we will start as we approach 1:45. We're about running to time, so no issue, Sophie. We're still running to time. Time to ask some rounds of Q&A from the Q&A box. So I will hastily bring that up, and I can see that we've already got about 9 questions or so in there. So if you're interested in posting a question for the panel to answer, please do try to do that. Not in the chat, but in the Q&A if you could. I tend with these things to try to ask the most upvoted question. So if you want to upvote, I believe it's the thumbs up. And we won't have chance to get through all of the questions, of course, as you'll understand. But obviously what we will try to do is that those questions that are asked in rounds, we'll ask the whole panel to answer them so that it gets a full sort of airing. Now let's just have a look. If you can also please try to avoid making statements, that would help, so that we've actually got live questions we can ask to the panel. It gives us more of a choice then, doesn't it, to be putting to the panel. Looking at this, there's a question here, I believe, from Lucy White, which we'll start with you, Adam, on, if that's okay. And Lucy says, I'd love for my small parish councils to go out and repair street lamps, but how do I get the money out of the county council to achieve that? I'm guessing that Lucy's citing monies out with the parish precept or parish form of council tax when she asks that question. But any steers to Lucy, Adam, on that one?
It's really tricky, and I mean, to be honest, with my kind of government towns hat on, one of the things that local areas have really appreciated in the way that we've designed the 20 million endowment for those areas is it's 15 million capital, 5 million revenue, and that combo of capital and revenue means that you can do some of those repairs easily. So no, I don't really have a good sense of how to get that funding out of the county council. You know, using kind of local precepts is probably the way to do some of that where that is possible. Business improvement districts or power to change have done some work on community improvement districts might be a way to do that, a kind of additional source of levy funding locally. And some of those public realm works have been done by bids or SIDS in the places where they exist. But no, I think I assure you that I am banging the drum to get more money from counties and districts down to parishes and towns, but don't have specific tactical advice for how to get that stuff out of them in the short term.
Yeah, understood. That's brilliant, fantastic. Thanks. As you say, it's a complex issue, and the parish precepts for smaller councils, as Carl will know, tend to be under 25k, which is why if they've got within their budget, you know, a set, albeit limited envelope on what they're planning to spend that on, anything that comes in mid-year or anything that they haven't otherwise budgeted for is kind of an on-cost on top of that. So they then start to look in rural areas for other sources of funding, which I guess is maybe where this Lucy's question is coming from. Carl, any views as to how this might be solved in North Yorkshire if a council came at you with such a request?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't had such a request. Out of those 6 pilots that I mentioned, nobody's actually gone to as basic as just looking after streetlights. That may well come in time. I mean, what we do when we have a double devolved deal, we passport to the parish the amount of money that we would save by not having to do that responsibility. But I would just say beware of that to the parish, because it may cost the parish more because of the lack of economies of scale to actually repair their own streetlights and maintain their own streetlights than it does cost us to repair streetlights. But we're happy to have that conversation in due course. I'd like to get these first 6 pilots done and dusted first before we start just talking about streetlights. But it's exactly the sort of thing about pride of place that Adam was mentioning. You know, if that's an important issue to the parish council and they're prepared to precept for it, then fine. You know, in due course, we'll have those conversations.
Understood. Yeah, no, exactly. And highlights that it is, you know, not a simple process, but where, you know, hearts and minds are reading from the same hymn sheet, as it were, solutions can be found. Sophie, from your sort of perhaps more technical Cornwall angle, any solutions here?
Well, I think there's a bigger prize here, and we have in Cornwall, we've been rolling out a programme of actually, it's part of our decarbonisation scheme, of actually changing those light bulbs to the newer, better system, which A, doesn't require replacements on anything. I mean, they last for years and years and years. B, are dimmable. So you can actually change them up and down a bit and see the night skies, but also have darker skies if that's, oh help, I'm about to restart my computer. Hang on. It's all right, deferred. But in terms of Carl's right, I would put that package, think strategically within your town and parish councils. What is the package of stuff that is important to you? And that might be around assets, it might be around services. Some of that will save the council money if you the upper tier council money if you take it on. And some of it you will be able to do a better quality. So put that package together and put it to your upper tier council.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, exactly. And it makes sense. And as you say, presumably more so in a fully parished area, Sophie, to look at things in the round holistically instead of just one isolated asset, liability or service. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So hopefully that answers Lucy's question somewhat. I'm looking at Rod's Rod's made a statement, but it's a good statement. So I think we make an exception in this case to ask the statement. Rod asks, what is the point of a neighbourhood development plan, including quote unquote details of any infrastructure requirements or requirements for affordable housing? Section 98(2)(a)(1)(c. Of course, I knew that, didn't I? When the delivery of such requirements is far beyond the capabilities of any parish or even town councils. So perhaps there might be mixed views on that. But certainly the national perspective is that NALC is a huge advocate for neighbourhood plans and per se neighbourhood development orders generally, because 90% of them are run by parish councils, as may be reflected in Cornwall or North Yorkshire. I'm not sure, but nationally that is certainly the case. And we continue to, from our end, bat for the locality funding to continue into the longer term. We have picked up one or two sort of recent queries about the expense of the referendum section of it at the end, and that some places of it can be a bit more costly. But in principle, we support it. So Carl, if I start with that one with you, do you have any views per se on neighbourhood development plans, or is it your view that it's beyond parish councils to deliver them?
I have to confess, in all the time that I was on the district council, I was never allowed anywhere near the planning committee because I'm a permissive planner. Yeah, so they kept me off the development control committee, which I think was a message in itself, that it was development control rather than planning. However, so I'm not an expert on this, but I mean, I think the principle behind it is that there has to be cooperation and consultation with all parties. And in North Yorkshire, we reckon that we're going to need 8,500 new houses in the next 5 years, which is what our local plan we think will produce. We've got 5 years to produce that local plan. I think everybody agrees that we need more housing. The problem comes when you actually say, and we're going to put some of it there or there or there, and then that's when you get those levels of objection. So I think neighbourhood plans are useful tools as long as they're being used to actually help produce the growth that we know we need for the people who, sadly, at the moment, do not have their own homes to live in.
No, understood, and certainly you'd expect NALC to be fully supportive of affordable housing. I think that we also have positions on second homes, which we also do know, regrettably, are an issue in many rural areas for residents in parish communities. It's all interlinked, as you rightly say. I'm guessing that where Rod is perhaps coming from here is that the hitting of targets there, as opposed to querying the rightness or wrongness of whether or not some of these targets should be, or the aims should be in there or not. But certainly we will remain firmly committed to supporting neighbourhood planning from our end, and always have done. Sophie, any tips, any answers from yourself then?
I think for me, the point of the neighbourhood plans are to give the local community that control over of deciding where. So they might not have a say in the overall numbers. Well, through consultation of the local plan you do, but the point is that the due regard has to be taken of them when planning decisions are being made. So if a neighbourhood plan is in place, it carries weight, and therefore there has to be a good thing for a local community to be able to describe where they want things to be placed within their community and how they want their community to grow, and that will then have weight in the wider planning system. So yes, they're quite onerous to put in place, obviously, and it takes a lot of effort to do it. But I would be very supportive. We always are in Cornwall. We have a large number.
No, indeed, and that's fantastic to hear. Thanks so much. Adam, any brief steers on this? It's a bit of a technical question, but broadly speaking, on neighbourhood planning and parish capacity, etc.
I am not going to add anything to the excellent answers from Carl and Sophie, so I'll stick with this.
No, indeed, and I think it could be that Rod is hinting at here that actually what different parish councils seek from their end to gain from embarking on a neighbourhood plan may differ. Having said that, we've always been quite supportive of the national need for more housing, etc. But we've said in our NALC responses to these consultations that actually parish councils need to be more adequately consulted, and it's especially on housing allocations and yes, where they go, because we one of the points we've made is that parishes do know their patch very well, and actually in terms of where the houses go can often be very, very useful to consult and ask or liaise with to avoid mistakes being made by planning authorities or others. So I think it's got to be a joined up conversation, hasn't it, with regard to neighbourhood planning. I scanned down and found another question here which might be suitable, and it's from Lisa O'Sullivan. It's, I think, something which everyone could have a stab at answering, but it says here, tips from Sophie and Lucy on how we engage with the county. Presumably Lisa's talking there about her on behalf of her own parish council as part of their devolution planning, and does NALC have a role to play in representing our, presumably the local council, interests in the process? So any tips, I guess, Sophie, if we take you first on this one, on how parishes can engage with unitary or county unitary councils as part of their devolution planning. That's the main question, I guess.
So I think Lisa's from Surrey, looking at previous questions. I'm presuming that there is a Surrey Association of Local Councils.
Yes, yes.
And hopefully they will have a strong relationship with Surrey County Council. But for us, our absolute CALC in Cornwall Association of Local Councils is absolutely instrumental in terms of that helping that voice be heard. But there is also there should also be, if Surrey are good at engagement, mechanisms for individual parishes and town councils to be heard. We in Cornwall, we're very lucky because, well, it's been part of the plan, is we've established area committees, the community area partnerships, which are we've got 12 clusters of those throughout Cornwall, and they're also very useful consultation forums. But I think it's about getting the structure and the relationships in place, Lisa. That's the most important thing. And without that, it will be hard, I think, to your local members also are your local councillors in terms of your county and district councillors are also really important in that engagement loop, and don't forget your MPs as well.
No, brilliant. That's great. Thanks so much, Sophie. And again, the local sort of technical angle there, which is really good. Adam, any broad steers here in terms of how parishes could or should engage with counties or county unitaries in terms of their own devolution planning there? Anything you've picked up or views?
So it's difficult, right? Because the move in the new legislation to have it be an upper tier conversation has had benefits in terms of pace. We've now got over 60% of the country covered by a devolution deal, but it's had a real trade-off in terms of the amount of local consultation that there is. And I think ministers knew that when they made the decision. I guess my key thing would be to project up to either your local MP or to others an area where you think some devolved powers might be really exciting, right? So if there is a particular project where you say, if as part of this devolution deal, we did something differently about, I don't know, if DCMS devolves some powers about how they manage a particular cultural asset, that could be something really exciting in the new Devo deal for this patch, but it could be something you kind of triple devolve down to a parish and town council. If that was, very specific, very concrete, this is the thing we're after, this is what it could add, you could imagine an MP particularly going to a minister and saying, got this quite fun suggestion. It's basically no skin off anyone else's nose. It's be interesting, it'd be exciting. It might be kind of election friendly given the political cycle. So I guess my steer would be find a thing that you think would be really important for you and could be a win for multiple levels of government and try and get that in, as opposed to, a really broad conversation could be quite tricky and take up a lot of time. So pick a thing, campaign on that would be a tip.
I think that's really good advice, because having been on the other end of actually from a unitary end of trying to put a devolution deal together, it's absolutely brilliant to have those specific little hooks in it that are examples of what you're trying to achieve more broadly.
Yeah, no, I can also see where Adam's coming from a national perspective. It's also possible sometimes to be too general and too strategic. Whereas actually, if you're wanting some local lobbying done by a local MP or peer, whoever, meeting with a minister, from DLUC or from their own patch, whatever, it's more compelling and more relevant, isn't it? If you've got that hook, but still within Sophie, the kind of general package that you're talking about, which perhaps you were referring to, principal authorities should be having with parishes in their patch or individual parishes in their patch, to save time, really. Carl, any views on this, given the current process you're going through?
Yeah, I would just support what Sophie said there about engaging with your local member. That's what councillors are elected to do, to be the conduit between the council and the electorate. So I would say to people, build up that relationship with your local councillor. Of course, councillors are as varied as parish councils are. Some have different views to the rest of us. Some may not be wanting to go on the same journey that we want to go on. But in that case, then we have an executive member who's responsible for doing our relationship with parish councils. So contact him. In North Yorkshire, it's a guy called David Chance. And if you can't get hold of him, get hold of me.
Excellent. That's good. That's great advice. Thanks, Carl. Yes, and just demonstrating the kind of range of skills and conversations which presumably need to happen at different levels during these Devo deals. Adam, cited there a figure we picked up in local government news a couple of days ago about 60% of the country being technically now covered with Devo deals. That's great in terms of the onward sort of march towards devolution. We need to get the other 40% sort of covered, but providing, of course, from our angle that parishes are involved in the conversation somehow, and that's really our only point, I think, on this. Listen, in terms of next question, we've got the chair of our larger councils committee, Councillor Ian Hamilton from Merseyside, who's asked an interesting question here. I'll précis it with the bit of context that Ian's included. So a knock-on impact of the investment from levelling up work, in particular with regards to green space and parks. I think maybe you mentioned some of this earlier on in your piece, Adam, which we maintain, which Ian's from Halewood Town Council in Merseyside, will now cost significant sums more to maintain at a good level. So the question is this something that towns and parishes should be acutely aware of prior to bids being made or development proposals being put together by top-tier authorities? So back to you first on this one, Adam, on the cycle. Is that something you have experience of, or you touched on it in your 5 buckets there? Should parishes be cautious before making these bids or development proposals?
Yes, is the short answer. There are lots of, I'm a big supporter of community ownership of any asset, and very supportive of the government doing everything they can to make that process easy and supported, having, every area having updated lists of assets of community value, running that kind of community right to bid process. But you do see instances in which some councils do just kind of offload things that are much more kind of liabilities, and often parish and town councils that care about that asset kind of extend beyond their means, and that really is a bad idea, particularly for the viability of all the other services and assets that parish and town council might run. I am pleased that in things like the Community Ownership Fund and the national pots to help with this, that they do have, I think, the rigor to try and make sure that some of those things might not come through. So if it's accessing national pots, there should be a process to make sure that assets aren't taken on that would end up being difficult for the organisation owning them. But yes, I think people should be really cautious and recognise that there will be ongoing revenue requirements for some of these assets, and you need to make sure that you've anticipated those as well as any kind of capital maintenance too.
No, indeed. And we've got myriad, legion examples in the past that we've picked up. I won't mention any of them here and now, but where literally, and in some cases, actually, Sophie, it has been where, and Carl, it has been where in isolated incidents, unitaries have been created, or shall I say, reorganisation has happened, not across the piece, but occasionally where, and sometimes where a new town council has been created, and I mentioned this in front of Adam, where literally there hasn't been a single asset as such that's been devolved. It's been just a list of liabilities, which has meant that it's had a crippling effect on the new town council, even just as their first full council happens. And they've almost got to the first agenda item after they elect everyone and elect the chair and the mayor or whatever, is to say, how the hell do we pay for this list of liabilities from the principal authority? So, Sophie, perhaps ask you that question. What is it something which parishes in certain instances, as Adam said, should be cautious about?
In every instance, do make sure the due diligence is done, and if you can, get the upper tier authority to pay for that due diligence as part of the deal. And I would also add, be very, very aware and beware of retaining walls.
Right. Very good point. Very good analogy. Yes, indeed. Carl, any views? I mean, sort of maybe this is sort of instructive given the stages you're at with the pilots or about to embark on them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Chris. I mean, we should all be aware of risk. I mean, that's the fundamental, and that's what the negotiations need to be about. Not just ambition, but also the risks involved. And we will put a team of experts together to actually help people understand what it is that, where the risks might be, because it is our responsibility to delegate and not to abdicate. And as I said, but I've just been thinking now about, we're doing our local plan, and it'll take up to 5 years to develop it. I'll be very surprised if in that local plan we don't identify that one of the options for us to provide more housing is to develop new settlements rather than just add on to existing settlements. And of course, the benefit of doing a new settlement is that you can plan right from the start to get all the infrastructure, the roads and the soft stuff like doctors' surgeries, etc., into place right from the start. But I think we also need to build in something about that new settlement is going to need that tier of local government to help it operate. And we need to make sure that we're planning for that as well. So I've learned something this morning as well to take away as an action for myself.
No, indeed. And this next question will interest you, but I'll bring Sophie in to answer this one. This is going to be the last question, I think, given some of what you might want to say in response. So it's come from a long-standing friend of NELC, Philip Rowe, the clerk of Newton Abbot Town Council down in Devon, which you say you know a bit, Sophie. And he asks a very good question. I was reading on the DULA website yesterday about this as well, and mentions that Devon is a 3-tier area of local government, are just receiving a Devo deal with Torbay, which Plymouth opted out of. So far, Phil says that he thinks there's nothing in the deal for local councils, parish councils, so far, presumably in the negotiations. So how do local councils change that, Sophie, if they feel as though somehow, and I know it's not a fully parished county, Devon, there are, I think, patches of unparished areas, but how do those local councils kind of change that, get their oar in, as it were?
I think that's back to the earlier question, isn't it, about influencing that upper devolution through the Devon Association, through councillors, both district and county. But essentially, it is a really complicated landscape in Devon, and
yes.
with previously chief executive to district councils there, and I think the voice of the parishes is harder to hear in those 3-tier areas. But I revert to our previous answers really on that one, I think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's our experience as well. It does tend to be more complicated, the relationship, doesn't it, in areas of the country where there are 3 tiers, which I guess, Carl, is one reason why you advocated for LGR in North Yorkshire, and simply because you're dealing with more voices at district and borough level as well. But Carl, given the inception of the pilots and the discussions you're about to have or are having, how would you advise parishes down in Devon to sort of make sure that their voice was being heard if, as a fan of parishes, you sort of were concerned that they didn't feel as though they were being listened to, or might have had a loss of voice, as it were?
I would say get in touch with your local member. We all stand for election to serve the community. So That's our role. It's our role to listen, and then, as I say, be the conduit back to which I'm no fan of two tiers. Sorry, the upper two tiers, but at the same time, they exist, and where they exist, you have to make it work.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and keep the communication going. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Carl. Adam, parting shots on this one. How do parishes, I guess per se, make sure that they continue being listened to at all stages of negotiations on Devo deals?
Yeah, I think it is about those stories, right? So the point when we can bring parishes to life, and we tried to do that in the paper that we published on this a couple of years ago, is through the individual instances when it's really clear that parish and town councils have been adding value to their communities. And it can be difficult sometimes when you're in the day-to-day, because when you're asked, what do you do really well, you list the full range of your responsibilities, all right, or kind of go to some of your impact indicators, whatever else. The individual moments, the stories, the personal things, the particular assets, the events, that's the sort of thing to highlight, because that builds the political momentum that then leads to the changes in governance or funding or resources. So find those stories and make sure that now can others know about them and can broadcast them as much as possible.
That's fantastic. Listen, it's 11 minutes past 1. We could go on some fascinating discussions, and glad some of this has been useful for yourself, Carl, to directly inform current negotiations as they happen with the Devo deal up there. But it just remains for me to say to Adam, Sophie, and Carl, huge thanks for valuable and insightful contributions. Each person brought a unique angle and expertise to today's discussions, without which, again, today it couldn't have happened without you. So again, massive thank you to you for that. Please do, this is to delegates really, please do fill out the feedback form in Zoom, just before you go. In some instances, I think you almost have to leave Zoom for it to click up. I'm advised by colleagues, but the link may actually crop up on the screen there before you do that. It's within Zoom. Our post-event mailing, as I say, will include the chat and sort of that news story link I mentioned to you, and any resources which speakers want to sort of send to me kind of by the end of today. Or links, we can happily include them, and that will be issued by the end of the week. But again, we like to finish these events kind of on time. So I'll make sure I get the essential points in it, which is to thank again our sponsors, Clear, CCLA, and Blashir Illuminations for their ongoing support, turnout for these events, and hopefully that will continue, again into the next financial year as well. And please don't forget to check out our online events program for events, which we've released 4 new ones of. You can see them listed on the screen there in front of you. So just to add it for a bit, emerging trends in local government finance, or April, June, climate change, climate emergency. That's always a huge seller in the sector. Artificial intelligence, new departure on that one for July, and then again another huge one on neighbourhood plans, which we touched on again today. But otherwise, yeah, the links there on the slide for where you can book. Hugely appreciated. It's been really interesting from my perspective to hear today's discussion. Thanks for joining, and goodbye.